I'm Kirtop, and these are 100 ancient ruins that resemble alien bases. The oldest galaxy. When researchers noticed a tiny glowing spot with record-breaking red emission in the James Webb data stream, they decided to check if it was an algorithm error, but the calculations were confirmed. In front of them was possibly a galaxy born just 90 million years after the Big Bang. They named it Capitoro, after an Italian mountain that is just as ancient and immovable. If the discovery is confirmed, it will put an end to dozens of theories. Standard models suggest the universe couldn't have formed such a massive object in so short a time. Capitoro shines too brightly for its age and, according to preliminary estimates, contains about 1 billion stars, as if someone hit the fast-forward button on evolution. Some scientists suggest that the observed signal is not a galaxy, but a nearby substellar object, like a brown dwarf. But the spectrum does not match. Others say that we are seeing something new, an intermediate form of life between a star and an entire system, a kind of early scaffold that things later grow from. If Capitoro is indeed a galaxy, then we are looking at the moment when darkness first retreated, at the birth of the first sources of light that began to disperse the primordial void. While scientists argue about what exactly is reflected in this data, one thing is clear. Each new image from Webb doesn't so much provide answers as it breaks old patterns. The universe behaves as if it deliberately doesn't want to be figured out. Traces of fire under megaliths. Under many ancient megalithic structures, archaeologists find charred layers, but these are not remnants of campfires. The temperature was too high for ordinary people to have created it. In some places, the stones are melted as if they were exposed to plasma or a powerful energy source. In Pumapunku, in Tiwanaku, Bolivia, there are marks on the basalt slabs as if they were cut with a red-hot tool. In Egypt, melted edges of blocks are recorded where there should be neither fire nor volcanism. Scientists explain this as random natural processes, but the temperature clearly exceeded the level of any natural fire. There are too many coincidences, as if in ancient times energy was used that was comparable to modern plasma cutting, or even more powerful. Then megaliths stop being tombs or ritual structures. They become evidence of technologies people simply did not have. The Wolfsegg Iron Cube, Austria, 1885. A worker is splitting a piece of brown coal, a tiny iron cube with smooth edges and grooves, as if made by a lathe, rolls out of the black lump. The newspapers instantly dub the find a bolt from the Stone Age, since the coal was found in layers estimated to be over 20 million years old. The cube ended up in the Salzburg Museum, where it was discovered that it wasn't pure iron, but cast iron with a high content of carbon and slag. The alloy is typical for 19th century blast furnaces. There's a tiny tail visible on the edge, the spot where the iron flowed out of the casting mold. Under a microscope, the surface is covered with porous, chambered rust, just like blast furnace slag. A piece of waste accidentally got into the coal cart and went down into the seam with it. And yet, looking at the almost perfect surfaces of the cube, visitors remark that the geometry is just too precise for a random fragment. Maybe it's a part of an unknown mechanism that nature hid deep within the rock. Cosmic alignment. You can forgive the ancients for being imprecise. You can explain away a mistake, but Egypt did not make mistakes. The Great Pyramid is aligned to the cardinal points with a deviation of less than 0.05 degrees. That's more precise than most modern buildings. To achieve such alignment, it's not enough to just know where north is. You have to account for the Earth's precession, its axial wobble, which shifts the starry sky over thousands of years. That means, to build the pyramid so precisely, the builders would have had to observe the stars for centuries, or have data that shouldn't have existed. But what's even stranger is this. How are the 3 main pyramids of Giza arranged? They mirror the shape of the 3 stars in Orion's belt. Not approximately, but with precise alignment to the era of 10,500 BC. That's exactly when, according to astronomical models, the constellation Orion was in the same position above the horizon. The Egyptians called Orion Sa, the body of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. Coincidence? There's another mystery connected to this alignment, the pyramid center. The distance from it to the center of the Earth between the North and South poles and between the eastern and western meridians is minimal. This is the geographic axis of the planet. How did they determine it? The scientific explanation is observation, trial and error, and millennia of experience. The alternative is that someone already knew, and the pyramid is just a trace left by their instruments, or a landmark for those who were supposed to return. The greatest mystery of the world. Off the coast of the Japanese island of Yonaguni, underwater ruins of an ancient city have been discovered, estimated to be 10,000 years old. This complex, resembling a pyramid, a castle, temples, an arch, and a stadium, is connected by roads. In 2007, marine biologist Masaki Kimura described the main structure as a monolithic stepped pyramid, 25 meters high. He suggested that the structures were built by the Jomon people, who lived on these islands 14,000 years ago. However, Professor Robert Schoch from Boston University expressed the opinion that the Yonaguni Monument is a natural geological formation. 37 years have passed since the Japanese Atlantis was first discovered in 1986, but its origin is still shrouded in mystery. Kimura proposed a theory that it was part of the continent of Mu, lost due to a catastrophe. He also found a stone image, including an underwater sphinx. Seismologist Toro Ochi from Kobe University supported Kimura's hypothesis, rejecting assumptions about the natural origin of the structures. However, Professor Schoch sticks to his view, claiming that the structure is not artificial and its characteristics are the result of natural processes. So the depths of the sea near Yonaguni continue to hold the mystery of these amazing structures, remaining the subject of discussion and research among scientists. 100,000 people and millions of tons of resources. When Elon Musk talks about Mars, it doesn't sound like a dream, but like an engineering plan. Recently, he once again mentioned a figure that made many people reconsider their idea of colonization. To create a sustainable community on the red planet, it won't take just a dozen researchers, but at least 100,000 people. Musk claims that a single landing is not enough. The planet must become autonomous, producing food, energy, oxygen, and metals. The colony must survive even if Earth goes silent. To achieve this, about 1 million tons of equipment and resources need to be delivered. Factories, reactors, domes, recycling systems. It sounds crazy, but according to him, Starship is already designed for such a task. Each rocket will be able to carry up to 100 tons of cargo, and launches can happen every few days. Mars shouldn't be just a backup airfield, says Musk. It should become a second home. Can you really call a project human if its initial conditions are closer to hard labor than to utopia? But if you look at it more broadly, Musk is simply describing the natural course of history. Once ships sailed into the ocean, now they go into space. And perhaps it is these 100,000 who will become a new form of humanity. People born under a different sky, for whom the sun is no longer the center, but just the nearest star. The supernatural destruction of Mohenjo-Daro. In 1922, an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, together with a Buddhist monk, went to an area that turned out to be a religious monument. Instead of mounds of mud and stones in the Sindh area, which is now part of modern Pakistan, an entire Bronze Age city was discovered, with a grid of streets, a drainage system, and flush toilets. The city was part of the Harappan civilization, which reached its peak 5,000 years ago and ceased to exist around 1900 BC. The Mound of the Dead is the legacy of one of the oldest civilizations. The inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro were in no way inferior to those of Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia. At one time, about 35,000 people lived in this region, but archaeologists have managed to find only 43 skeletons that have survived to this day. The disappearance of the city was mysterious, but in 1977, a British researcher discovered evidence indicating that a powerful explosion was the cause. Melted stones and calcined skeletons suggest that the inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro died instantly. In 2014, a doctor of mineralogy conducted a series of analyses and tests which makes it possible to claim connections between the Arab civilization and aliens. This is indicated not only by the high level of development of the local inhabitants, but also by the fact that they were burned at a temperature of several thousand degrees. There are no volcanoes here, and there were no technologies capable of reaching such temperatures.
Открытие Ноева ковчега.
In 1959, Captain İlkan Durupanar, while working on aerial photography for NATO in Turkey, made an unexpected discovery. At an altitude of 2,000 meters, he noticed unusual geological formations resembling the outlines of a giant ship. This discovery sparked a lot of debate and speculation that the remains found could be Noah's Ark. The discovery attracted the attention of both scientists and adventurers. Despite numerous expeditions and studies in the following years, no definitive evidence has yet been found to confirm the biblical story of the Ark. However, this region continues to be a subject of scientific interest. To support the possibility of real events like the biblical flood, geological studies in the Black Sea region have shown that about 6,000 years ago, a catastrophic flooding did indeed occur. This could have been caused by the massive melting of glaciers, which led to a significant rise in sea level. In addition, clay tablets dating from the same period were found in Mesopotamia. One of these tablets describes the story of the Great Flood and the rescue of various species of animals on a ship, which has notable parallels with the story of Noah from the Bible. These findings suggest that the themes of global catastrophes and rescue on a ship may have deep historical roots. Their roots run through many cultures and civilizations. Jupiter's birthday. For a long time, Jupiter was considered the oldest planet in the solar system, but no one could say exactly how much older it is than Earth. Now we have an answer. A group of planetary scientists from Japan and Italy calculated that the giant was born just 1.8 million years after the formation of the solar system. For cosmic scales, that's just a moment, but it was this very moment that determined the fate of all the other planets. The scientists used an unusual method, computer modeling of the behavior of chondrules, microspheres of silicates that billions of years ago floated in the dust cloud from which the planets were forming. These microscopic particles hold the signatures of the first catastrophes, collisions, flares, evaporations. By their age and composition, it's possible to reconstruct the pace of Jupiter's birth. The models showed that the giant appeared when the rest of the solar system was just beginning to condense. At that time, its mass was comparable to Mars, but its gravity was already working like a vacuum cleaner, pulling everything in around it. It was Jupiter that became the first force to change the balance of the young system. It pulled in gas, shuffled orbits, disrupted the formation of several potential planets, and possibly even saved Earth by taking millions of comet impacts upon itself. This reconstruction makes Jupiter not just a neighbor, but a founder. It's the first sign of active motion in the chaos, the center around which the others lined up. It's ironic that the largest and brightest object after the Sun is the result of almost a childlike experiment by the universe. Jupiter emerged like an embryo of Mars, gained mass in just a few million years, and became the one who determined everything else. 4.5 billion years have passed since then. But even now, looking at it through a telescope, you can imagine how a planet was born from a hot cloud of gas, the first to learn how to be a giant. Dragon houses in Mount Ochi. The dragon houses on the island of Evia in Greece are mysterious megalithic structures that impress with their massive size and precision. These ancient structures, built from huge stone blocks without the use of mortar, date back to around the 8th century BC. Legends associate the dragon houses with the gods, particularly Zeus, and describe them as places of sacred rituals and the dwelling of ancient dragons guarding these lands. Mount Ochi, where some of the dragon houses are located, is considered a place of contact with the gods because of its remoteness and majestic location. In ancient Greek mythology, mountains were often associated with the dwellings of the gods and places of their manifestations. This mountain, rising above the surrounding landscapes, could be perceived as a sacred place where divine encounters and rituals took place. Archaeologists face many difficulties when studying these megalithic structures. One of the main mysteries is how the ancient builders managed to transport and place such huge stone blocks on the tops of mountains. The logistical and technical aspects of their construction remain unclear, especially considering the lack of modern tools and equipment. The lack of precise information on when and why these structures were built makes them harder to study and interpret. According to legend, Zeus used these places for his meetings with people and other gods. The dragons mentioned in legends could have been symbols of his power and the protection of sacred places. There is a theory that the dragon houses could have been places of contact with extraterrestrials. Supporters of this hypothesis claim that the unusual architecture and precise geometry of these structures indicate possible influence from extraterrestrial civilizations. They believe that the ancient Greeks might have interpreted encounters with extraterrestrials as contacts with gods, which was reflected in their myths and legends. Water around a dwarf star. When the TESS telescope transmitted the first data about the planet Toi, 1846b scientists expected to see yet another hot, lifeless sphere, a typical hot planet orbiting a red dwarf. But with each new observation, it became clear this world does not fit the usual idea. Toi 1846. B is almost twice as large as Earth and 4 times heavier. It orbits its star in just 4 days, so close that the surface temperature rises to 300 degrees. But even in such conditions, the instruments detected signals indicating something impossible, traces of water. Not oceans as we understand them, but deep layers of liquid hidden beneath a rocky crust or a dense atmosphere. Scientists are careful with their wording, but the essence remains. Even in hell, water can exist. And if it can, then the ways water can be preserved on planets are far broader than we thought. It's like finding pottery in a place where there shouldn't be any clay. Nature constantly breaks its own laws. TOI 1846bi orbits a star that is more than 7 billion years old. This is an ancient system that has survived to a time when many of its neighbors have long since faded away. If there really is water there, it is older than all of human history, older than Earth itself. Perhaps in this insane heat, there are chemical traces of how water survives the death of planets, so that one day it can become their beginning again. Soon, the James Webb Telescope and future extremely large telescopes, which are being built right in the Atacama, will look there. The driest places on Earth are searching for water hundreds of light years away. Spaceship in Turkey. In Turkey, not far from the city of Şanlıurfa, is one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the world, Göbekli Tepe. This complex, which is over 12,000 years old, consists of massive stone structures arranged in circles. Göbekli Tepe is considered the oldest known temple complex on Earth. The megaliths, reaching up to 6 meters in height and weighing several tons, are impressive for their precision and craftsmanship. The stone slabs are decorated with carvings depicting animals and abstract symbols. This level of art and engineering raises many questions about how ancient people were able to create such complex structures without modern technology. Researchers suggest that the construction of Göbekli Tepe might have been connected to extraterrestrial technologies. These hypotheses are based on the unusual precision and scale of the complex, which some believe could only have been achieved with advanced technologies, possibly provided by extraterrestrial civilizations. Göbekli Tepe continues to attract the attention of enthusiastic scientists from all over the world, fueling interest in ancient mysteries and possible contacts with extraterrestrial beings. Martian coral. On July 24, 2025, the Curiosity rover sent a photo that initially left scientists stunned. On the rock, there was a shape all too familiar to us from Earth. It looked like coral, a real fossilized coral, evidence that Mars might once have had an ocean teeming with life. NASA was quick to explain, no biology, just minerals that took on a strange shape due to water and wind erosion. It's a rock, not an organism. Our brain fills in familiar images where there are none. The official explanation sounds logical, too logical. But how many times have we heard the same thing? A rock just happens to look like a statue. A shadow just happens to look like a tower. A shape just happens to resemble the outline of a living creature. At what point does the number of these coincidences become proof? Maybe it really is just nature's play? Or maybe we're just not ready to hear the main thing. Mars was alive. And that's exactly why we're so drawn to it. Because deep down we are returning home. They detected a real alien. It appeared suddenly. The third interstellar visitor to pass through the solar system. 3I Atlas. It's neither a comet, nor an asteroid, nor anything you could put in a school textbook. Astronomers immediately notice something strange. The object doesn't reflect sunlight, but seems to emit it on its own. Such behavior doesn't follow the usual laws of physics. There's a cloud of dust around the object, but calculations show that inside there's something dense and geometrically regular. Mathematician Eric Ketta and astrophysicist Avi Loeb, the same one who once suggested that Oumuamua could be an artificial probe, once again raised an uncomfortable question. If this is neither a comet nor a fragment of a star, then what is it? Their model showed that the observed illumination is best explained by an internal energy source. 3I Atlas is located between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. It is 3.5 times farther from the Sun than Earth, but even there, the object remains visible. The closer it is to the star, the more the color of its surface changes, as if it is reacting. The James Webb Telescope is already pointed at it. Rumors say the data made scientists rethink their observation protocols. If it's a piece of a star, it should have cooled down millions of years ago. If it's a ship, it doesn't resemble any technology we know. And while official reports are being postponed for revision, there remains an object in the sky that behaves as if it is alive and controlled. For the first time, officials from many countries aren't calling it an optical illusion. Now everyone is just waiting. Military abductions and secret bases, thousands of stories, hundreds of memoirs, and they all say the same thing. Contact has already happened. But not in front of the world, not live on air. It happened in the shadows. Classified, top secret. One of the most discussed cases is the story of Charles James Hall, a U.S. Air Force veteran who served at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. He claims he worked side by side with aliens, whites, grays, even Nordics, tall humanoids who look like humans. According to him, the whites could live up to 700 years, and the contact was officially a technology exchange. According to another version, the U.S. authorities allowed aliens to temporarily base themselves on Earth, supposedly for the sake of technology exchange. A Cold War-style deal. You give us something, we give you something. But what exactly did humans give away? Genetic material? Permission for abductions? Yes, abductions. In the 1960s, a whole wave of stories broke out in the U.S. and Europe about nighttime visits, examinations, implants, and mysterious dreams that left scars and fragments of memories. Many of those abducted were not fanatics or ufologists. They were doctors, military personnel, engineers, people who suddenly knew too much. Today, these stories are mocked or ignored. But one fact remains. The number of testimonies is too great to simply write them off as imagination. Tombs not meant for humans, archaeologists are used to interpreting everything within familiar frameworks. If there is a stone box, then it must be a sarcophagus. But in Egypt and Peru, there are burials that do not fit the human scale. In Saqqara, there are granite boxes weighing 60 to 70 tons each. They are crafted with jeweler's precision, but the interiors are so huge that a single human body would look tiny inside. It's inconvenient for several people. Why are they so large? On the other side of the world, in the Andes, tiny stone sarcophagi have been discovered. Their proportions are so small that an adult body simply wouldn't fit inside. The official version is that these are children's burials or symbolic rituals. But then why were they crafted with the same skill as royal tombs? Another mystery is the emptiness. Many of these sarcophagi contain no traces of burial, no bones, no funerary items. It's as if they were never used as tombs. And then there's the theory that these aren't tombs, but capsules that once stored or transported those who were not human. Too big, too small, different? Maybe the answer lies here as to why the myths of almost all peoples speak of gods who came from the sky. Klerksdorp spheres. In the mines near South Africa's Klerksdorp, miners occasionally dig up tiny spheres made of dark stone. They are perfectly round, with black parallel grooves along the equator. It's as if they were shaped on a lathe. The surrounding rock is about 3 billion years old, and that's why a theory quickly appeared on the internet that these are gears from prehistoric machines or souvenirs from aliens. But as soon as geologists cut a couple of these spheres open, they found a ring-like alternation of pyrite and hematite inside. Layer by layer, these minerals were deposited around a grain of sand, while the bottom sediments of the ancient sea were gradually compressed. The grooves are not carvings, but traces of crystal growth and rock compression. The soft pyrophyllite around the spheres compressed, leaving furrows. So the mystery comes down to a rare but natural process of mineralization. Everything else is just imagination, sparked by a perfectly round shape that nature can sometimes create as well as any master craftsman. Chichen Itza and its mysteries. Chichen Itza was of great importance to the Maya civilization as a political, economic, and religious center. This ancient city, located on the northern Yucatan Peninsula, was an important place for rituals and ceremonies connected with the gods and astronomical events. Erich von Däniken, known for his theories about ancient aliens, drew attention to the El Castillo Pyramid, the Temple of Kukulkan, in his research. He suggested that the precision of the architectural and astronomical elements of the pyramid could indicate contact between the Maya and extraterrestrial civilizations. Däniken noted that pyramids like El Castillo might have been built using technologies unknown to modern scientists. The symbolic meaning of the light show on the steps of the El Castillo pyramid during the equinox is connected to the ritual worship of the god Kukulkan. On the days of the spring and autumn equinox, sunlight creates the illusion of a serpent descending the steps of the pyramid. This phenomenon was interpreted as the return of Kukulkan to Earth, which confirmed the importance of the Maya's astronomical knowledge and their ability to design architecture that harmonized with the movement of celestial bodies. The Maya believed in the return of the god Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, who symbolized rebirth and renewal. This belief was based on ancient myths and texts such as the Popol Vuh and the Maya codices, which describe the cyclical nature of time and the return of the gods at certain moments in history. Kukulkan was an important deity associated with wind, water, and fertility, which made his cult especially significant for the agrarian Maya society. Modern archaeologists interpret these findings as evidence of the high level of development in astronomy and engineering among the Maya. They believe that the pyramids and other structures of Chichen Itza were built taking into account complex mathematical calculations and observations of the movements of celestial bodies. Millions of dollars spent on observing UFOs. In the south of England, in the mists of Norfolk, there is an old Royal Air Force base. Once Soviet bombers were monitored from here, and now a man lives here who has declared war on the sky. Millionaire William Sochiti. He bought the entire complex along with the huge Type 84 radar from the Cold War era and turned the underground bunker into a headquarters for hunting UFOs. Outside there are overgrown antennas, concrete, and rust. Inside there are server racks, monitors, and an artificial intelligence that Sochiti calls RadarBot. This program analyzes radio signals and notifies if something appears in the sky that doesn't look like an airplane or a satellite. Anyone can connect to the system, buy an antenna for $25, and observe the sky within a 200-kilometer radius. The more antennas there are, the wider the network becomes. He says it's not about the money. There's no point being the richest man in the graveyard. But it is here, beneath layers of concrete, that he has created something even governments fear: an open database of all strange signals over Britain. Ironically, it all started with a childhood story, when he, a schoolboy from Zimbabwe, saw a glowing spot over a field and heard other children shouting that it was a UFO. Decades have passed, and now he has his own radar, his own station, and the right to watch the sky without any permissions. The monolith on Phobos, one of Mars's 2 moons, hides an amazing secret: a giant monolith. This monolith, about 85 meters tall, was first discovered in images taken by spacecraft. Its size and regular shape raise many questions among scientists. Some researchers suggest that the monolith could be an artificial structure left by an ancient extraterrestrial civilization. This hypothesis is based on its unusual geometry and its isolation from other geological formations on the surface of Phobos. The monolith appears as if it was deliberately placed at this location. This discovery sparked intense discussions in the scientific community and gave rise to numerous theories. Some believe that the monolith could be an ancient beacon or marker left for future space explorers. Others see it as possible evidence of extraterrestrial activity in our solar system. The Black Knight satellite. It is said that for 13,000 years, our planet has been watched by the mysterious Black Knight. Strange radio echoes that Nikola Tesla detected in 1899 were woven into the legend. A 1954 newspaper article about two unknown satellites and a photo from the STS-88 shuttle mission in 1998, where a coal-black triangle hangs over the Earth like an extraterrestrial sentinel in polar orbit. But each puzzle piece had an earthly explanation. The echo signal is due to the ionosphere's whims. The satellites from 1954 turned out to be journalistic exaggeration, and the vague silhouette in the NASA photo is just a thermal insulation blanket lost by astronauts, registered as debris number 025570, which burned up in the atmosphere a few days later. Nevertheless, the myth lives on. Every time an amateur telescope catches the glint of space debris, the shadow of the night falls once again on the night sky, reminding us how easily a piece of foil can turn into the keeper of alien secrets. Mars archives. People talk too much about Mars. But there is one coincidence. Almost all ancient peoples mention the red star in their legends as a place where gods lived or where they came from. The Sumerians associated it with the god of war, Indian epics with heavenly chariots, and the Egyptians even called it the place of wanderers. Modern researchers add fuel to the fire. Back in the 70s, rumors were circulating about secret footage from orbit, where the ruins of cities were supposedly visible. Officially, these photos were never published, and those that are available today raise new questions. Mars looks like a huge library, its pages filled with billions of years of history. We only see the cover. We brought ancient creatures back to life. In northern Alaska, where the permafrost preserves the scent of ancient Earth, a group of researchers from the University of Colorado drilled a tunnel deep into the ice to retrieve samples that are 40,000 years old. And what they found looks like a scene from a science fiction movie that suddenly became a documentary. In the samples, the microorganisms that appeared didn't come back to life instantly. It took months. At first, the scientists thought the colonies were simply inert, but after some time they began to reproduce. Under the microscope, threads and clumps appeared, gradually turning into a stable community. The microbes seemed to be waiting for a signal to start breathing again. Ancient forms of life began to release carbon dioxide, and some of them methane. This process is invisible, but it is exactly what can change the climate. Gases that have accumulated under the ice for millions of years are beginning to escape, and along with them, things that have been dormant in the frozen layers for thousands of years are also coming out. In 2022, a virus almost 50,000 years old was already revived in Siberia. It's safe for humans, but the very fact proved ancient pathogens have not disappeared. They are simply waiting for temperatures to rise. Now, similar cases are being recorded in Canada, Greenland, and Alaska. Scientists say that there is no threat yet, but when you look at the test tubes where ancient bacteria are moving again, it's hard not to feel anxious. We are increasingly interfering with the planet's archive and with what we take from it. And maybe one day the ice will really respond. Not with cold, but with something alive, something that remembers the Earth even before humans appeared on it. Life in icy oceans. When searching for life, we've always looked at Mars. But perhaps the most promising worlds are even farther away. Beneath layers of ice, Europa, Enceladus, Ganymede. These moons look like silent white spheres, but beneath their surfaces there are oceans that are tens of kilometers deep. Water, heat from internal sources, and the chemical elements necessary for life. On Enceladus, the Cassini spacecraft detected geysers shooting into space. Organic molecules were found in them. On Europa, cracks have been observed from which clouds of steam periodically erupt. And if there really are oceans raging beneath the ice, then this is the perfect environment for the development of living beings. Maybe they are similar to Earth's squids or jellyfish, or maybe they are completely different, with forms and organic matter unlike anything we know. Scientists speak cautiously. But we understand that if there really is life there, it won't just be another discovery. It will be an encounter with beings that have lived for millions of years in isolation, in another ocean, under a different sky. And then the solar system will no longer seem like ours. It will become shared. A tomb that is never opened Everyone knows about the Sphinx, but almost no one knows that beneath it, there is probably a cavity, sealed and even partially covered with concrete. Back in the 1990s, physicist Thomas Dobetsky conducted acoustic probing of the plateau. Under the front paws of the Sphinx, an anomaly was discovered, a hollow chamber with clear rectangular edges. It could not have been a natural formation. It was a room or a tomb or something else. This news rocked the world of alternative archaeology. The claims went even further. Supposedly, ancient Egyptian texts mentioned a certain hall of records, a place where knowledge left by the gods before the flood was kept. And it could have been located right there, under the Sphinx. One step, and we could have opened the door to a prehistoric past. But instead, there was silence. The Egyptian authorities did not grant permission for excavations, and the site was declared off-limits for further research. Moreover, according to unconfirmed reports, the shaft at the base of the Sphinx was filled with concrete, just like that, without any explanation. Why? It's unclear. Perhaps not because there's nothing there, but because they know exactly what is there. The shape of the telescope matters. Astronomers often say that the size of the mirror is the limit of our vision. James Webb was the limit of what was possible. Its hexagonal mirror, 6.5 meters in diameter, is folded like an orchid, and anything larger can no longer be launched into space. But physicists from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute suggested not increasing the size of the mirror, but changing its shape. They came up with a rectangular mirror, a narrow but long strip stretching 20 meters from end to end. It collects less light per unit of time, but it has the same resolution as a circle with a diameter 10 times larger. Such a telescope can be deployed in space without complex sections, without the risk of breaking using a regular rocket. The project has already been named the Habitable Worlds Observatory. Its goal is to see planets similar to Earth at distances of up to 10 parsecs. Not as dots, but as worlds with atmospheres, clouds, and possibly oceans. Models show that in 3 years of observations, such a rectangle is capable of detecting more than 20 potentially habitable worlds similar to our Sun. There is something symbolic about this. To find new Earths, humanity had to give up the perfect shape of a circle, something that had been considered perfect for centuries. Maybe life itself in the universe doesn't have to be symmetrical either. Sometimes the answer is visible only from a different angle.
Колонна Ашоки.
In Delhi, India, in the courtyard of Qutb Minar, there has been a 7-meter iron pillar standing for 1,500 years. The metal is dark, but almost without rust. Only a thin brown film. Legend has it that if you wrap your arms around the pillar, your wish will come true. Some say that the column was forged according to a recipe given by heavenly blacksmiths. The unusual thing about the pillar is that unlike ordinary iron in the Indian climate that rusts in a few seasons, it remains intact. Its material has been studied repeatedly. It turned out that the shaft is welded from hundreds of strips of wrought iron with a high phosphorus content and almost no sulfur. When rain slightly corrodes the surface, the phosphorus reacts and forms a dense passive film that blocks oxygen better than any paint. The column was turned so that the side with more phosphorus-rich metal faced the midday sun. The heat helped the protective film form faster. So the durability of the pillar is not a miracle, but a fortunate mix of ore and the precise calculations of craftsmen who knew how to properly position their creation. Still, the pillar seems out of place among the rusty grates and staircases. A tourist, running his hand over the cold metal, doesn't see the phosphorus oxides, but scientists wonder, how could blacksmiths of the 5th century without blast furnaces or laboratories come up with a composition that would last 10 times longer than they did? The answer is known, but the sense of the magic of iron doesn't disappear. When UFOs became a matter of state concern, antiquity is not the place where you would expect bureaucracy documenting UFOs, but in Rome, it existed. The priests had direct access to power, and they kept official chronicles of omens. Everything that happened in the sky was perceived as a message from the gods, and if a blazing shield flew over the city, it was considered a political signal. Gaius Julius Obsequens, a Roman historian, collected such reports in the Prodigiorum Liber, and the list looked eerily familiar. Glowing discs, moving lights, figures in the sky that hovered and disappeared. This isn't folklore, it's official state reporting. The wildest thing is that sometimes, based on these phenomena, the Senate would overturn decisions, start wars, or on the contrary, make peace. Because if a sign comes from above, you are obliged to respond to it. One of these signs was the disappearance of King Romulus, the founder of Rome, who was supposedly taken up into the sky right in front of the crowd. He didn't die, he didn't run away, he literally ascended. So Rome has a god founder who came from up there. It's not about whether they believed in UFOs, it's about how seriously they took them. The ancients couldn't explain what it was, but they didn't ignore it either. And today we do the opposite. We know things aren't clear, but we act like everything's fine. Satellite data. Modern satellite images, available through various internet platforms, such as Google Earth, show possible entrances to underground bases in Antarctica. One such example is images showing strange holes in the ice sheet that resemble artificial structures. Satellite images have also been discovered on South Georgia Island, which, according to some researchers, indicate a possible UFO crash. One such image was found on Google Earth and shows an object resembling a crashed spacecraft. The image attracted the interest of both ufologists and internet researchers, who suggested that it could be debris of extraterrestrial origin. Some of these objects have unusual shapes and sizes that are difficult to explain by natural processes. The alleged UFO on South Georgia Island is often compared to the interstellar object Oumuamua, which attracted the attention of scientists in 2017. Oumuamua was discovered as the first known interstellar object passing through the solar system, with a shape and trajectory that do not match the characteristics of ordinary asteroids or comets. This led to hypotheses that it could be an alien probe or spacecraft. Only outer space is drier. If there is anywhere on Earth where you can feel the breath of another planet, it is Atacama. A strip of land squeezed between the Andes and the coastal Cordillera hasn't seen rain for 400 years. The air here is so dry that metal rusts more slowly. This absolute lifelessness has made the desert the main laboratory for studying space. In San Pedro de Atacama, the air smells of sulfur and salt. During the day, the heat escapes the sand to 40 degrees, and at night the temperature drops below zero. Silence, where even footsteps sound like gunshots. Everything here is made for looking up. At an altitude of over 4,000 meters where the thin air rings like glass, giant antennas stand in a row. ALMA, Magellan, the Very Large Telescope.
Они улавливают свет, шедший к нам.
Billions of years, and break it down into the finest bands, like a researcher who gathers the past of the universe piece by piece. When you look at these giant antennas, you feel that they are not like machines, but like living beings listening to the universe. Their aluminum ears catch the breath of stars, the cold rustle of intergalactic dust, and the echoes of distant bursts. In Atacama, a person is literally between two worlds, stone and space. Sometimes at night, local guides turn off the headlights and the sky turns into a black dome with millions of needles of light. People stand in silence and watch as the Milky Veil rises over the mountains. At this moment, it becomes clear. If there is a place on Earth where you can hear the universe, it is here, in a place where only the cosmos dries everything out. Skeletons of giants. In the archives of the 1920s, there are strange notes. In the burial mounds of North America, skeletons up to 3 meters tall were found. In the Andes, archaeologists spoke of jaws and skulls that were too large for a human. The findings disappeared. Some blame the churches, others blame government institutions that cleaned up inconvenient evidence. Myths of different peoples repeat the same thing. The Sumerians wrote about the Anunnaki, as tall as towers. The Bible mentioned the Nephilim, the sons of God who took earthly women for themselves. Native American tribes told stories about battles with giants who came from the sky and fed on human flesh. Scientists explain these legends as fantasies and mistakes. But why does this motif appear among peoples?
Связанных друг с другом. И почему?
And is connected with the sky and the gods? If giants really existed, then they could have been a different branch of humanity, or hybrids of humans and aliens. In that case, the history of our planet is not only the evolution of Homo sapiens, but also coexistence with those who were much bigger and stronger. Petrified waves. The Curiosity rover has been roaming the Gale crater for 12 years now, a huge basin over 150 kilometers in diameter. Its cameras have long gotten used to the dust, rocks, and endless terrain. But recently, Strange structures appeared in the images, rows of small ridges stretching in one direction, like frozen waves. Scientists debated for years whether it was caused by wind, sediments, or tectonics. Comparing the data to Earth's sedimentary models removed all doubts. These ribbed patterns were left by water, real waves that splashed on the surface of a still lake. An ocean is not needed for their formation. A depth of 1 or 2 meters and moderate wind is enough.
Такой могла быть атмосфера Марса в ту эпоху.
The water rippled, leaving a pattern on the sandy bottom. Then it dried up, but the imprint remained for billions of years. This discovery may seem insignificant, just a few square meters of terrain, but it changes a lot. Previously, it was thought ancient Martian water bodies might have been concealed beneath ice, similar to Antarctica's. Now we are sure that at least in one place, Mars had an open water surface where waves reflected the sunlight. Curiosity continues to climb to the top of Mount Sharp, and each new layer of sediment reveals another page of this planetary chronicle. The layer with waves may be the last page from the time when Mars was still alive. The impact of the asteroid in contact with the gods. The asteroid that is believed to have wiped out the dinosaurs about 66 million years ago left a significant mark on the Yucatan Peninsula. This impact created the Chicxulub crater, which is still an important geological site. Although this cataclysm occurred long before the rise of the Maya civilization, the geological and ecological consequences may have influenced the formation of the region where this culture later developed. Archaeological findings, such as cities and structures destroyed and buried under layers of sediment, may indirectly support the theory of cataclysms that occurred in Yucatan. Nevertheless, there is no direct evidence that the Maya knew about the asteroid that destroyed the dinosaurs or had any information about them. The idea that the Maya could have had contact with dinosaurs is scientifically unfounded. Dinosaurs became extinct long before the appearance of the first humans, let alone the Maya civilization. However, in their mythology and art, you can find depictions of creatures that can be interpreted as legendary or mythical animals, but this is not evidence of real contact with dinosaurs. Researchers sometimes find dinosaur fossils in Mesoamerica, but these discoveries date back to times that predate human history. Such findings may be interesting for geologists or paleontologists, but they do not support the theory of contact between the Maya and dinosaurs. Knowledge of ancient cataclysms may have been integrated into their mythology and beliefs related to natural phenomena and the actions of the gods. The Maya believed in the cyclical nature of time and recurring catastrophes, which could have reflected their understanding of the past and their anticipation of future events. A medieval helmet on Mars. On August 5th, the Perseverance rover photographed a strange rock. In the photo, it looked like an old helmet, half buried in the sand. The edge is sharp, the sides smoothly converge, and the surface is covered with many small spheres. Scientists named the find horned fly and immediately noted, such a texture has not been seen on Mars before. These tiny spheres are mineral formations that appear through weathering, deposition, or under the influence of water. But on horned fly, there are so many of them that the entire surface looks as if it's covered with pearls. This can't be explained by ordinary erosion. It's possible that for millions of years, groundwater rich in minerals passed through the rocks. Each drop left a trace. Or on the contrary, a stream of hot gases etched the surface, leaving scorched bubbles. The rover's instruments have already detected similar structures, but never in such quantity. On Earth, such formations are typical for areas with active hydrothermal activity, places where underground water meets heat. If this analogy is correct, it means that in the crater and the lake, there was not just moisture, but circulation, similar to what supports life near underwater volcanoes. Now, Perseverance is on the crater's northern edge, climbing sedimentary layers like an archaeologist exploring an ancient city. With each meter up, it becomes increasingly clear. This helmet is not a random shape, but another reminder that the planet was not always a dead desert. Stars that disappeared. In 2019, astronomers published the results of a decade-long project comparing old and new sky catalogs. Thousands of stars that were observed in the mid-20th century were no longer in the same places. Some had faded, others simply disappeared, as if they had been erased. The official explanation sounded cautious: observational errors, supernovae that were missed, or variable stars with atypical cycles. The problem is that some of these stars couldn't have vanished so quickly. The story about Tabby's star, the KIC object in the constellation Cygnus, became especially well known. Its brightness would drop by tens of percent and then return, as if something huge was blocking the light. This can't be explained by planets or clouds of dust. The theory that sends chills down your spine was simple: a megastructure, an artificial construction the size of a star system that collects the energy of its star. Scientists call this the Dyson hypothesis, a sphere or a swarm of satellites that could only be built by a civilization an order of magnitude more advanced than ours. Initially, it sounded like science fiction, but disappearing stars and unusual brightness drops keep bringing scientists back to this idea. If even some of these cases are real, it means there are civilizations in the universe capable of harnessing the energy of entire stars, and they leave traces that we are already seeing. Artifacts that aren't displayed. You might be surprised, but not all archaeological finds make it to museum showcases. Some disappear even before official documentation. There are no press releases about them. They aren't shown on TV, and they don't even make it into scientific catalogs. They're either lost or hidden, sometimes on orders from above, sometimes to avoid causing problems, and sometimes it's because no one wants to explain what it actually is. A former assistant at the Cairo Museum accidentally mentioned an expedition from the 1970s involving a copper disc that had been found. There were symbols on its surface that could not be matched to any known script. The object was taken to storage, and a month later, it was lost. Later, photographs were found. The photos show the disc and something like a map of a different starry sky. There is even evidence that in the burials from the 5th Dynasty period, objects made of strange alloys that cannot be analyzed were found. One of the archaeologists who kept a copy of the report claimed it's not bronze, not gold, not silver, it's something else. Where they are now, no one knows. Some will say it's a myth. But then why is access to the storage of the Cairo Museum closed to most researchers? Why can't even Egyptian scientists get in there without special permission? Could these items explain a lot, or would they cast too much doubt on everything? Is fishing on Mars possible? Everything we knew about Mars falls apart when you look at the images of the Noachis Terra region. Where there is dust and silence, orbiters have found an intertwined network of ancient channels, more than 15,000 kilometers of stone rivers. They stretch like scars, like a plateau, disappearing under layers of sedimentary rock and telling a story that lasted millions of years. These valleys are not dried up cracks, but real traces of water flow. Along them, sedimentary terraces have been preserved, exposed by erosion, and elongated ridges that resemble channels, fossilized after the flow disappeared. All of this indicates that there was once a climate here capable of supporting rain on the red planet. The very idea sounds almost heretical, but data from orbital probes confirm it. Mars's atmosphere was once dense and humid. Scientists call this era the Noachian, a time when the planet was blue. Rivers, lakes, deltas, everything that is now buried under dust once filled the valleys with life. Water flowed here not just for a day or a year. It shaped the landscape like a sculptor, leaving behind deposits that can still be read today. Everything we see now, the cold desert, rocks, and storms, is just the final scene of a long play. And when Perseverance finds clay minerals or stones polished by the stream, it's actually digging in an ancient riverbed where something could have once been alive. Does that mean you could have fished on Mars in ancient times? A letter from the future. In one of the temples of Abydos, there's a carving on a ceiling beam that still baffles even those who dismiss conspiracy theories. There, next to the classic hieroglyphs, you can clearly see the outline of a helicopter. Below it, there's something that looks like a tank or a submarine. There's also an object that resembles a drone with 4 blades. The shape of the detail is too precise to be a coincidence. Official science claims that this is a palimpsest, the result of later priests carving new symbols over the old ones. Supposedly, part of the plaster crumbled over time, and the overlapping images created an optical illusion. But then why is this illusion so clear? Why are the figures so complete? And most importantly, why did they look like 20th century technology and not abstract symbols? And this isn't an isolated case. In the temples of Dendera and Edfu, they also find images that are too technological for their era. The Dendera lamp is the most famous example, a giant glass bulb with conductive elements inside. Egyptologists say it's a symbol of the origin of life, while engineers say it's almost a diagram of an electron tube. Some inscriptions contain terms that have not been translated to this day, not because they are forgotten, but because their structure does not fit into known grammar. A dark mass 10 billion light years away, almost beyond imagination. That's where astronomers notice something that doesn't emit light, doesn't rotate, and doesn't interact with matter except through gravity. The lightest of all known dark objects, with a mass 1,000,000 times greater than the Sun. But for the cosmos, that's just a speck of dust. Scientists are sure it's not a star and not a black hole. Most likely it's a clump of dark matter. It's impossible to see it directly. But gravity distorts the light of distant galaxies. And by these distortions, it's possible to calculate how much invisible mass is hidden in space. That's exactly how it was found, by the slight bending of rays passing by. If the calculations are correct, this discovery confirms that dark matter isn't continuous, but consists of separate dense clouds filling galaxies, including ours. They are unseen, yet their shadow shapes the universe. Paradoxically, lower mass objects reveal more about the cosmos' structure. This clump is like a fingerprint of an unknown creator. It's too precise to be a coincidence. We've been watched for a long time. If we're searching for signals, it's logical to assume that someone might be searching for us too. But what if they've already found us long ago? In 2020, a group of astronomers published a study that changed the very way the question was posed. Scientists from Cornell University studied the surroundings of Earth and identified 1,400 star systems from which it is possible to observe our planet passing across the disk of the Sun. In other words, to see Earth the way we see exoplanets. Their main conclusion is simple. If there is intelligent life in one of these systems, they could know right now that we are here. Moreover, 508 of these star systems are positioned so that Earth would be visible against the background of the Sun for more than 10 hours in a row. That's enough to detect an atmosphere with oxygen, methane, and possibly signs of life. They could have detected us thousands of years ago, observed and waited. Or maybe they've already sent a signal that's still on its way. The SETI project is a global network of radio telescopes tracking anomalies and signals from deep space. We've listened to thousands of systems, but so far, there's only silence. Modern scientists are cautious, but not skeptical. No one laughs anymore at those who say, maybe we're not alone, because there are billions of planets suitable for life.
Оплавленные крепости.
In the mountains of Scotland, there are ruins that still make archaeologists argue. At first glance, it's an ordinary fortification from the Bronze and Iron Ages. The walls are made of stone with remains of dwellings and traces of campfires. But if you look closely, it becomes clear. The stones are fused. Entire sections of the walls look as if they've been through a furnace. The rocks have fused together and turned into a single glassy monolith. This isn't the result of a fire. The melting point of sandstone is over 1,000 degrees. To achieve this effect, you would need to keep a fire burning for several days, creating an enclosed space where the heat doesn't escape. Someone not only built these fortresses, but also intentionally burned them, making them solid blocks. Experiments in the 20th century showed that this effect can only be achieved under controlled conditions. Scientists Wally Stornicroft and Veer Gordon Child repeated the process. They set fire to a wall made of slabs and wooden layers, then covered it with clay. After 3 hours of burning, the structure collapsed, but parts of the stone really fused together. Later, it became clear that the temperature had to be kept stable for several days with a constant supply of oxygen. In other words, this was a technology, not an accident. Someone, back in the times when metal was not yet in use, already understood how to control heat. Similar forts were later found all over Northern Europe. More than 200 places where stone was melted by people. No one knows why it happened at that particular time. But in this strange knowledge about fire, which does not destroy but binds, there is a sense of something too sophisticated for its era, as if this is not just ancient engineering but a technology passed down long ago, the meaning of which we still cannot unravel. After all, we could see similar technology in ancient Egypt with the melted steps. $2 billion for silence about aliens? The famous ufologist Stephen Greer is once again in the spotlight. He stated that he received a generous offer from a high-ranking representative of the U.S. government, a person he calls one of the top UFO experts. According to Greer, he was offered a huge sum just to keep quiet. Greer founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence back in 1990. In recent years, he has repeatedly claimed contact with aliens and spoke of secret government operations. His reputation is controversial even among ufologists. Some see him as a brave whistleblower, while others see him as a fanatic without evidence. He said that in 1992, General Albert Stubblebine, the former head of U.S. military intelligence, allegedly personally offered him $2 billion to give up his public activities. At that time, Greer was just over 30 years old. He was a young doctor, and according to him, he seriously considered it, but refused. He believed that all of this was part of a large-scale disinformation operation involving the CIA and other intelligence agencies. The host of the podcast where this story was told expressed doubt, calling it hard to believe. But Greer insists he is ready to take lie detector tests and his wife can confirm everything he said. However, General Stubblebine died in 2017 and can no longer refute or confirm this story. On the eastern edge of the Martian Valles Marineris, a probe recorded a strange shine on Mars, as if the dust was covered with a thin glaze. When spectral analysis confirmed the presence of iron hydroxysulfate, the scientists fell silent. This mineral couldn't have appeared just like that. 3 conditions are needed for its formation: water, oxygen, and heat above 100 degrees. That means when it appeared, Mars was still alive, breathing, and boiling. The discovery site is the Aram Chaos region, where the terrain seems to be mixed with Kimbur, layers of underground ice used to lie here, and then something heated them up to the point of explosion. The ice melted, water burst to the surface, and a crater lake formed which existed until it evaporated, leaving behind salts and this mysterious mineral. On Earth, it's almost never found. It's too humid. It breaks down too quickly. The Martian desert became the perfect oven, where minerals were baked like ceramics. Perhaps the last bursts of volcanism, or the movement of hot underground water, created conditions where water and fire came together at the edge of life. The temperature at which this mineral forms speaks for itself. Mars stayed hot much longer than we thought. Not a dead world, but one still smoldering from within. Iron hydroxysulfate is not just a chemical rarity, but direct evidence that flows of heat and moisture persisted beneath the surface for a long time. And if there was once liquid water deep underground, then microscopic life could have survived there as well. UFOs are not just a 20th century thing. When we hear the word UFO, the 20th century immediately comes to mind. Roswell movies and tinfoil hats. But the truth is that people saw unidentified objects long before the era of television and aviation. We have documented cases dating back to ancient Rome. Chronicles recorded fiery shields, flying ships, strange beings descending from the sky, and even abductions in the clouds. All of this was recorded not by science fiction writers, but by historians, monks, and officials. In the 4th century AD, the Roman chronicler Julius Obsecens described dozens of such cases in his book Liber de Prodigis. Over Rome, people allegedly saw blazing spheres, glowing ships, and beings that descended from the sky. At least that's how the eyewitnesses perceived it. Pliny the Elder also mentions a mysterious burning shield that hovered over the city during the Second Punic War. And this is not the only case. Similar descriptions are found in the chronicles of Ireland, China, and India. What was it? A coincidence in symbolism? A mass hallucination? Or did we really observe the same phenomenon, just calling it different things in different eras? Once they were gods, then angels. Today, aliens. But perhaps the essence is the same. Space smuggling. Every era has its own secret desires, even for those who travel beyond Earth. Space is a place where everything is calculated down to the gram, but it is there that a person most often remembers that he is not just part of a mission, but a living being who needs a sense of home. Spring of 1965. The Gemini 3 mission. 2 astronomers, Gus Grissom and John Young, are conducting the first test of a new capsule. Everything is going according to plan until Young pulls a corned beef sandwich out of his pocket. a real one from the cafe at the Cosmodrome. Grissom laughs, takes a bite, and then chaos begins. Crumbs of meat and bread fly around the compartment, float in the air, and stick to the instruments. In zero gravity, even a crumb is a dangerous projectile that can short-circuit the electronics. The sandwich is quickly put away, but the scandal on Earth still erupts. The story reaches Congress and becomes the world's first case of space smuggling. But while the Americans took the risk for a joke, the Soviet cosmonauts made it part of their tradition. Flasks of cognac, jars of pickles, and toasting kits hidden in fake onboard logs secretly appeared on board. Engineers, doctors, and technicians all knew about it, but kept silent. After difficult spacewalks, when your body was vibrating from exhaustion, one sip of something familiar would bring back your balance. When you look at the archival footage, you realize this habit isn't about breaking discipline, it's about humanity. Where everything is fine, sterile, and dangerous, a person looks for something that reminds them of life. A small jar of pickles in zero gravity says more about us than any speeches about progress. We can conquer planets, but we still never stray far from our kitchen. The mystery of the Ellora Caves. In India, in the state of Maharashtra, there is an amazing cave complex, the Ellora Caves. This architectural masterpiece, consisting of 34 caves, is carved directly into the rock and represents a unique combination of Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain temples. The age of the structures dates back to the period between the 6th and 10th centuries, AD. The Ellora Caves amaze with their precision and complexity. Some of them are enormous in size and feature exquisite details, carved with astonishing precision. The Kailasa Temple is especially impressive, carved from a single solid rock, and is considered the largest monolithic structure in the world. The technologies and methods used to create such complex and precise structures remain a mystery to this day. This has given rise to many theories, including suggestions of extraterrestrial involvement. Some researchers believe that ancient builders may have possessed knowledge and technologies passed down by extraterrestrial civilizations. This unique complex remains one of the most intriguing archaeological discoveries, offering more questions than answers.
3 исчезнувших артефакта.
In 1872, engineer Wayman Dixon descended into a narrow passage inside the Great Pyramid. He hardly expected to stumble upon one of Egypt's strangest mysteries. From a deep ventilation shaft only a few inches wide, he retrieved 3 objects: a stone ball, a copper hook, and a piece of cedar wood. All of them look primitive, but that's exactly what raises questions. Why were such things hidden in a hard-to-reach shaft? Who put them there, and how? These finds, later known as the Dixon relics, immediately became surrounded by myths. The stone is perfectly smooth, as if it were carved. The hook of a strange shape looks more like a tool than a relic, but the wooden fragment became the most mysterious part of the story. After being sent to Edinburgh, it disappeared, simply vanished, for decades. Only in the 2020s was part of the wood accidentally discovered in a box among forgotten collections. Analysis showed an age of over 5,000 years, possibly older than the pyramid itself. Why is this hardly ever mentioned? Why is no one in a hurry to investigate further? It seems these 3 items are the key, not to the sarcophagus, but to something more ancient, more frightening, to a secret that the pyramid still hides from us. Is Mars our second home? It seems that soon we really will reach Mars. SpaceX is already building rockets for flights. NASA is testing life support systems. China is preparing for its own missions. There are ambitious plans in the news. The first people will land on the red planet in the coming decades. Colonies, domes, resource extraction, greenhouses. It all sounds like the beginning of a new era. But Mars also has its dark sides. Radiation will kill a person in just a few months. The atmosphere is almost entirely made up of carbon dioxide, and sandstorms can last for weeks. To survive there, humanity will have to do more than just build bases. They'll have to completely rethink the very idea of life itself. This isn't just moving to a new Earth. It's existence on a hostile planet. And yet the main question is different. What if we won't be the first ones there? The images from the Mars rovers keep sparking debates again and again. Strange rock formations that look like ruins, objects that resemble statues or mechanisms. Scientists call this pareidolia. It's a feature of the human brain to see familiar shapes, but if even some of these discoveries are real, then the history of Mars might seem much richer. And maybe when we get there, we won't be building a new home, we'll just be returning to an old one. Shiva Lingam. In the city of Sirsi in India, there is a pilgrimage site called Sahasralinga. Here, among the natural beauty, there are stone images of Shiva Lingam that amaze with their appearance, especially during the festival of Mahashivaratri. At this time, the water level in the river drops, making the sculptures visible and attracting thousands of pilgrims and tourists who wish to see and worship the sacred lingams. Shiva Lingam is a symbol of Shiva, one of the main deities in Hinduism, representing the source of creation and destruction. Interestingly, there are not only religious but also scientific debates surrounding the Shiva Lingam. Some proponents of the ancient astronaut theory claim that the Shiva Lingam could represent a powerful technological device, similar in function to a modern nuclear reactor. Based on the shape and properties of the lingam, they suggest that ancient people might have used advanced technologies. On the other hand, modern scientists may interpret the Shiva Lingam as a symbol of atomic energy, which also has the potential for both great benefit and destruction. This analogy highlights the dual nature of Shiva, who in the Hindu tradition is both a creator and a destroyer at the same time. Trillions of alien sensors. Richard Bandrich speaks quietly, like a man who knows his words are already being recorded. Former NASA engineer Elohid Martin spent decades designing propulsion systems and now claims that Earth is littered with invisible devices of extraterrestrial origin. He says they've been here a long time and we're now finding them. He says it's not about ship debris, but about a network of tiny sensors, trillions of microscopic structures scattered across the planet. Some of them, he claims, are able to change shape and camouflage themselves with their surroundings. His team supposedly observed one such fragment under a microscope. The piece of metal was pulsating, as if it understood it was being watched. Banderich claims he saw these objects dissolve into dust. It's worth trying to study them. But the analysis revealed something that shouldn't exist. The isotopic composition doesn't match anything known on Earth. After the publication, his access to the materials was cut off. The laboratory was reassigned to a private organization, and the engineer himself was removed. Now he speaks openly. These are not our technologies. They are too ancient, too intelligent. According to him, the network works like a sensor monitoring system, not for attack, but for detecting life, an invisible web of antennas covering the planet. You can be skeptical about the engineer's words, but with every discovery that suggests artificial interference in the natural order of things, the line between the incredible and the quite possible becomes thinner. Sometimes it feels like we are being studied with the same interest with which we observe other worlds. The mystery of India's flying stones has always been shrouded in secrets and riddles. In any of its corners, you can encounter something amazing and incredible. Many people come here for new experiences, to discover unknown spiritual possibilities within themselves. Once you visit this amazing country, it's impossible to forget it. One of the mysteries of India is the levitating stones in the small village of Shivapur, which is located 200 kilometers from Bombay. Near the local temple, there are several boulders that weigh more than 50 kilograms. According to the locals, these stones can rise into the air. To lift the first heavier stone, 11 men are required. They must stand around it and say certain words. After that, the stone begins to levitate, and it can be supported with just one finger. The smaller boulder requires the participation of 9 men to lift it. There is also a third stone weighing more than 60 kilograms, which can only be lifted by the monks of the temple. The origin of these stones is mysterious. Some believe that they were sent by the gods, while others think that they broke off from a nearby cliff. A local resident who takes care of the temple claims that the stones occasionally split, and he replaces them with new ones by breaking them off from the cliff. But the new stones retain their ability to levitate. Some scientists suggest that ancient people were able to move objects with the power of their minds, as was the case during the construction of the Egyptian pyramids. Perhaps the knowledge of levitation was lost, but sometimes it resurfaces in places like Shivapur. Interestingly, in the last century, Edward Leeds Kalnin, an immigrant from Latvia, used similar methods to build his coral castle in Florida, which only confirms the existence of such knowledge. These unexplained studies support the hypothesis of extraterrestrial influence on ancient civilizations. suggesting that some technologies or methods could have been passed on to humanity by representatives from other worlds. Mars was sold at auction. At a Sotheby's auction in London, a small rock weighing 24.5 kilograms was brought into the hall. But this is not just a stone, it's a fragment of Mars, listed in the catalog as the largest of all known Martian meteorites found on Earth. It was sold for $5.3 million, and the buyer's name, as usual, was not disclosed. The story of this discovery began in 2023 in the Sahara Desert, in the territory of Niger. Local prospectors noticed a reddish-brown lump among the sand, covered with a melted crust. This is how the surface forms when entering the atmosphere, the moment when a space rock burns and melts on the outside, but remains cold on the inside. This shade is Martian, and the chemistry of its surface completely matches the samples that were once brought to Earth by the Viking probes. When the meteorite was cut open, it contained olivine crystals, a porphyritic inclusion, and tiny gas bubbles identical to those found in the atmosphere of Mars. Its age is hundreds of millions of years. Once this piece was ejected from the planet's surface as a result of an asteroid impact and wandered through space until it fell to Earth. Now it belongs to a private collector. It might be put on display in a museum, or it might be hidden away in a safe. It's hard to believe, but it's a fact. Someone now has a fragment of another planet sitting on their shelf. It's direct evidence that Mars had already been sending us its messages long before we learned how to send ours to it. Each such meteorite is not just a rock, it's a courier that traveled millions of kilometers to remind us that the connection between Earth and Mars began not with rockets, but with impacts from celestial bodies. Aliens have called home. Former American counterintelligence agent Luis Elizondo has once again made a sensational statement. According to him, some UFOs observed by the military have clearly engraved symbols that resemble ancient scripts. He claims that these signs may be an attempt by aliens to convey information or even instructions. Elizondo previously led the secret A-TIP program, which studied aerospace threats. He says that he personally saw oval objects with unusual surfaces on which symbols resembling hieroglyphs or runes were engraved. He believes that such things are not put there for no reason. It's part of communication. Interestingly, some of these symbols look similar to ancient scripts found on Earth. According to him, the Pentagon has been comparing these signs with ancient alphabets for a long time, trying to find a match. It's possible that aliens use a universal visual language, which means we have more in common than it seems. Elizondo even mentioned the phrase, "they've already called home," hinting at attempts to contact other worlds. Elizondo's testimony is also confirmed by other witnesses. Military pilot Jake Barber described how he saw an object of non-human origin just 150 feet away from him. Later, he was allegedly taken aboard a helicopter. Elizondo is certain that there are many such devices, and U.S. intelligence has been studying them for a long time, including fragments, microchips, and even biomaterials. He urges the authorities to disclose this information and start an honest dialogue with the public. The living meteorite. At the end of August, a resident of Panama who introduced himself as Kin posted a video online that instantly went viral. The footage shows a small stone lying on scorched earth. Something dark and shiny, resembling tentacles, is oozing out of its cracks. When touched, they burned leaves, and the stone itself seemed to breathe, emitting steam. Kin claims he found it in a crater after a flash in the night sky. In the first days, it seemed like science fiction, but then Kin showed that the object was growing, especially in the light. He kept it at home and later in a safe, because it's calmer at night. That's when it sleeps. He claimed he sent samples to friends for analysis, but the results were never published. Scientists were in no hurry to comment. On social media, people argued whether it was an alien organism or just the common fungus Anthurus archer, known as devil's fingers. It really does grow out of the ground, spreads a foul smell, and looks almost the same in the dark. But here, many things didn't add up. The shape was different, the structure was metallic, and the glow was not typical for either plants or fungi. Kin kept filming. In the latest video, the object was fully covered with growths, resembling living matter. Since then, the account was deleted, and only copies and mirrors of the videos remain. Of course, the story might turn out to be fake, but the very phenomenon of how quickly such stories gain millions of views says something else. Humanity needs a miracle. Not because it's real, but because it brings back the feeling that space can invade our everyday life at any moment. Egypt and UFOs. Thousands of years ago, Egyptians looked up at the sky and, judging by the text, saw more than just stars. In one of the papyri attributed to Pharaoh Thutmose III, a strange incident is described. A disk of fire appeared in the air, emitted light, hovered motionless, and then shot upward. This temple archive text was thought to be an allegory until it was compared to modern UFO descriptions. On the walls of some tombs, there were symbols that cannot be explained through mythology. Round objects with rays, figures floating in the air, strange capsules that priests are leaning over. They are not in the spotlight, but always somewhere nearby, as if they were part of everyday life or fear. The Egyptians believed that knowledge came from the sky, not metaphorically, but literally. Thoth, the god of wisdom, descended in the form of an ibis, but many texts describe him as shining from a heavenly boat. Osiris came on a ray of light. Even the term Neteru, which we translate as gods, literally means those who came, coincidence or a memory of something that once happened. If at least some of these coincidences are not fantasies, then perhaps Egypt was not isolated from civilization. It was a beacon for those who came from outside, or for those who were destined to return one day. The Diamond Needle of Anabar. In the spring of 2014, at the Anabar Placer in northern Yakutia, Russia, a gold prospector noticed not an ordinary grain of sand in his pan, but a tiny transparent needle, the length of a pinky fingernail. Diamonds almost always crystallize with facets, but here was a perfect cylinder without a single edge. The find was nicknamed the sewing needle of the dinosaur era. At the Yakutsk Institute, the sample was examined using laser spectroscopy and an electron microscope. It was confirmed to be a diamond, but on the surface they found an extremely thin film of titanium nitride and specks of cobalt, a protective layer used to coat synthetic technical crystals grown by the CVD method. They traced the source by the alloy marking. In the late 1990s, the Yakutsk Research Institute was making diamond thermocouple probes. They used them to measure steel temperature in melting ladles. During testing, the probe cracked and the fragment went to the waste pile. Spring floods eventually washed it into the ancient clay deposit where the prospector found it. The scientists quickly determined its true origin, but the story turned into a local legend, and every spring, gold diggers hope to find a similar artifact again.
Венера – планета, которая дышит.
If Mars is called our potential second home, then Venus is called hell, everything there is against life. Temperatures close to 500 degrees pressure, like at a depth of a kilometer in the ocean, and clouds of sulfuric acid. But in 2020, the world was shaken by something new. Phosphine was discovered in the atmosphere of Venus. On Earth, it appears in two cases, in the laboratory and as a byproduct of living organisms. Back in the 1970s, Soviet probes transmitted mysterious images. They showed objects resembling rocks that changed position. Scientists were quick to attribute everything to equipment defects. But after the discovery of phosphine, many recalled those photos. And now the question sounds different. What if there is life on Venus? Not the kind we're used to, but something different. The kind that has learned to survive in acidic clouds and use poison as air. If life exists where it shouldn't, then our Earth is not a unique miracle. We are not the exception. We are just one of the forms that happen to survive on our planet. A rocket versus a mirror. The video shown in the U.S. Congress lasts only a few seconds. In it, a Hellfire missile, the standard weapon of drones, flies toward a bright metallic object over the sea off the coast of Yemen. The moment of explosion, a flash and nothing. The strike seems to bounce off the mirror. No fire, no signs of destruction, just a brief shake of the frame and the surprised voice of the operator. This is not footage from a science fiction movie, but official video released by the committee overseeing unidentified anomalous phenomena. For the military, anything that can't be classified must be explained. But here, there is no explanation. The object doesn't look like a drone, doesn't behave like a missile, and doesn't leave a plasma trail. It reflects energy as if it has its own magnetic field, Online, it's already being called the Yemeni Mirror. Capable of absorbing an impact. Congress doesn't hide the fact. This isn't a U.S. test weapon and not a confirmed enemy object. This is a rare moment when an official organization shows the world something it can't explain itself. What do you think? What could it have been? Is it a new American weapon or a unique military object capable of deflecting enemy missiles the way a mirror reflects light? A computer that's 2,500 years old. The Aegean Sea, April 1900. Just 100 meters off the coast of a small island, divers discovered the site of an ancient shipwreck at a depth of 45 meters. For 2 years, researchers and archaeologists studied the wreckage, among which they found part of a metal box encrusted with corals and created in the 2nd century BC. This device is the first mechanical computer ever discovered by mankind. The mechanism is 1,500 years older than any similar artifact and contains dozens of gears that control the device. It is believed that the analog computer could have been used to predict astronomical events. Ancient Greece, as it turns out, had knowledge of mechanics and could create such a device, which completely changes our perception of history. It is believed that the ship set sail from the shores of the island of Rhodes, since this place was considered the hub of advanced technology at that time. Poets of ancient Greece repeatedly mentioned in their works living statues that could freeze in place or start moving as if life had been breathed into them. It is quite possible that this was not just a literary device, but the first prototypes of robots created by humans. The Greeks claimed that they received knowledge from gods who descended to them from the heavens. It is possible that in this way, they explained encounters with aliens who decided to share their technologies with humanity. The government is secretly contacting aliens. Recently, there have been reports about UFOs, including from Mexico, where they allegedly found the remains of aliens. It turned out they were dummies, but rumors about UFOs continue to spread online. Some people believe the planet is controlled by mysterious forces, while others see it as a distraction from real problems. Interest in UFOs was also fueled by former U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Tim Galladay, who claimed that the American government is connected with a non-human intelligence. According to him, this is kept secret in order to hide top-secret technologies that could provide an advantage in a military conflict. He is demanding the release of information about contact with non-human intelligence. On the other hand, Elon Musk is skeptical about the idea that aliens exist in our part of the galaxy. He believes that in the next couple of 100 years, humanity will not be able to travel vast distances in space, and that aliens are unlikely to be interested in a small planet on the outskirts of the galaxy. Musk is convinced that human consciousness is a unique phenomenon, and it needs to be preserved. These statements by influential figures fuel interest in the UFO topic, although they do not provide concrete facts. It's amazing that people in ancient times were interested in extraterrestrial objects, and they saw UFOs and aliens in everything. As the saying goes, there's no smoke without fire. Therefore, it's impossible to be 100% sure that there are no extraterrestrial objects or beings on our planet. What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments below the video. Could the U.S. government have any contact with extraterrestrial life nowadays?
Новое видео о Розуэле.
It's been almost 80 years since strange debris was found on a ranch in New Mexico. But the Roswell story has come back to life again. A 22-minute video suddenly appeared in the U.S. National Archives. No commentary, no annotations. The title is simple: The Roswell Incident. The footage shows a gray field, scattered metal fragments, a depression like an impact crater. Everything was filmed on old film. Users compared the landscape to eyewitness descriptions from 1947, and the similarities turned out to be eerily accurate. Someone noticed a vague silhouette in the right corner that looked like a body. Experts were quick to temper the excitement. The archive is not proof, it's just a repository. Most likely the video is related to documents from the Mogul program, when the US launched balloons to track Soviet nuclear tests. The official version is a weather balloon, the wreckage of which was mistaken for a flying saucer. But for UFO fans, this video's release is a big deal. The National Archives is not an anonymous forum. Random fakes are not uploaded there. Why the video appeared there only now is a question that no one is answering. And maybe that's the whole point of the Roswell story. Even if the mystery has long been explained, every new fragment brings back the feeling that somewhere under the dust of the past, there is still metal lying there that does not belong to Earth. If all this is true, then the history of Earth is much more complicated than we think. After all, UFO traces lead both to the sky and underground. And that's good news. That means we'll keep digging further. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, everyone.